Welcome to the Flag Bearer channel. This is Little Known Black History Facts. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The Marcus Garvey Must Go campaign. Marcus Garvey was the premier black leader of his day, but debates about his ideas among many black leaders quickly led to a public war of words between Garvey and his critics. They would use their publications and their papers to destroy his leadership. Garvey's critics formed the Garvey Must Go campaign. It not only opened up a contentious battle in print among rival black male leaders, but also showed how much influence the black press now had to elevate and or destroy black leadership. When Marcus Garvey first arrived in the United States in 1916, he quickly found his way to many of New York's most prominent black radical activists and intellectuals. And at least briefly, Garvey enjoyed their support. Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican-born black nationalist. He founded the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, in 1914. He advocated for the empowerment of black people globally, promoting a message of racial pride, economic self-sufficiency, and the establishment of an independent black nation in Africa. Garvey's message resonated with millions of black people worldwide, especially in the United States, where his Back to Africa movement gained substantial support. By the early 1920s, Garvey had become a polarizing figure. His message of black nationalism and his calls for the return of African Americans to Africa, combined with his creation of the Black Star Line, a shipping company intended to facilitate this migration, drew both admiration and criticism. But A. Philip Randolph and other black leaders, some of whom had supported Garvey after his arrival in the United States, came to believe that Garvey's program for black advancement was unsound and that Garvey himself was a charlatan. Though they admired his skills as a propagandist, these prominent black critics derided Garvey's proposed solutions for the problems of African Americans. They believed that his plans for black progress, including the Black Star Line and the establishment of a Pan-African empire, were unrealistic and ill-advised. They considered the Universal Negro Improvement Association's grandiose titles and military way of dressing to be preposterous, and they thought Garvey, with his assumption of a regal posture under the title Provisional President of Africa, to be a little more than a self-aggrandizing buffoon. A. Philip Randolph, who had introduced Garvey to his first American audience on a Harlem street corner, said Garvey has succeeded in making the Negro the laughingstock of the world. Other African American leaders, such as W.E.B. Du Bois of the NAACP, opposed Garvey's approach. They disagreed with his separatist stance and criticized his methods and organizational tactics. Du Bois famously referred to Garvey as the most dangerous enemy of the Negro race. The campaign to discredit Garvey was partly fueled by concerns that his radical ideas could harm the progress of African Americans in the United States. The differences between Garvey and other black leaders were ideological, with Garvey focusing on racial separatism and economic independence, while others advocated for integration and civil rights within American society. A. Philip Randolph saw Garvey as a charlatan, thinking his program was unrealistic and lacked class content. Unlike Garvey, Randolph advocated for the integration of African Americans into the mainstream American economy and society, focusing on labor rights and economic equality as the primary means of achieving racial justice. While Garvey promoted black nationalism and the idea of establishing an independent African nation as a solution to racial oppression, Randolph was one who believed in fighting for civil rights within the American system. He supported integration, socialism, and class solidarity across racial lines. He saw Garvey's Back to Africa movement as impractical and potentially harmful to the progress of African Americans in the United States. Additionally, Randolph criticized Garvey for what he perceived as the financial mismanagement of the UNIA and the failed Black Star Line, which Garvey had promoted as a means of facilitating the migration of black Americans to Africa. The Friends of Negro Freedom organization was created by A. Philip Randolph and Chandler Owen. the owners of the Messenger magazine. They formed the organization with goals of garnering support for Black-owned businesses and helping provide African American workers with training in labor union organizing techniques. The Friends of Negro Freedom distinguished itself from the leading civil rights organization of that era, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or NAACP, in that it was Black-led and financed, and that it pushed for economic reform. Friends of Negro Freedom also recruited mainly within a predominantly Black working class constituency, arguing that the NAACP membership, mostly whites and middle-class Blacks, was out of touch with the most important issues facing the majority of Blacks at that time. Randolph and Owen also hoped their organization would encourage socialism among U.S. Black workers. Friends of Negro Freedom excluded whites from membership, citing white involvement in the NAACP and the National Urban League as examples of weakness. Despite its ambitious plans and its desire to differentiate itself from middle-class organizations, its greatest rival was Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, which drew from the same working-class constituency that Friends of Negro Freedom hoped to organize. From its founding convention in Washington, D.C. in 1920, Friends of Negro Freedom leaders criticized the UNIA. Black opposition to Garvey coalesced in what came to be known as the Garvey Must Go campaign. Randolph started the Garvey Must Go campaign when it was revealed that Garvey had held a secret meeting with the Ku Klux Klan, and he published bitter writings against Black nationalism in the Messenger. Supporters of the campaign, which was started by Friends of Negro Freedom, intended to unmask Garvey as a fraud to his Black supporters. They also appealed to the federal government to step up investigations of irregularities in the Black Star Line and to look into alleged acts of violence on the part of Garvey's inner circle. The Garvey Must Go campaign gained momentum after Garvey held a secret meeting with Edward Young Clark, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, in June 1922. Garvey naively believed that the two organizations could work together since they both supported the goal of racial purity. Clark, in fact, did promise some financial assistance for the UNIA. Garvey had hoped that the Klan would support him in creating a separate Black nation. His mission, however, was a disaster. Other Black civil rights leaders shunned Garvey when they heard of the meeting. Immediately afterward, Randolph and Owen's Messenger magazine published an article entitled "Marcus Garvey, the Black Imperial Wizard, Becomes Messenger Boy of the White Ku Klux Klan." Randolph used his position as the editor of the Messenger to launch public attacks on Garvey. In his writings, Randolph accused Garvey of being a charlatan and a demagogue who was exploiting the hopes and dreams of Black people for personal gain. Randolph and other critics argued that Garvey's actions and rhetoric could set back the progress of African Americans in the United States. Leaders were further infuriated when they learned that Garvey, at a speaking engagement in New Orleans, remarked that because Black people had not built the railroad system, they should not insist on riding in the same cars with white patrons. The Messenger vowed to begin a vigorous editorial campaign against Garvey and promised to fire the opening gun in a campaign to drive Garvey and Garveyism from the American soil. The campaign from this point on was characterized by vitriolic personal attacks on both sides and by escalating threats of violence. Garvey Must Go meetings were violently dispersed by Garvey's followers. A. Philip Randolph received the severed hand of a white man in the mail. It was accompanied by a note signed by the KKK, but Randolph believed the hand had been sent by the UNIA. On January 15, 1983, a group of 8 prominent African Americans petitioned the U.S. Attorney General asking the U.S. government to continue its prosecution of Garvey on charges of mail fraud and to investigate acts of violence attributed to Garvey's followers. Among them, the assassination earlier that month in New Orleans of one of Garvey's former deputies, who had been expelled from the movement at the August 1922 convention on charges of personal misconduct. The letter of petition ended by urging the Attorney General to use his full influence completely to disband and disperse this vicious movement. and imploring him to vigorously and speedily push the government's case against Marcus Garvey for the use of the mail to defraud. The U.S. government, particularly the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, saw Garvey as a threat. His growing influence and his calls for black empowerment were viewed as potentially destabilizing. The Bureau, under J. Edgar Hoover, began to watch Garvey and the UNIA, looking for ways to neutralize his influence. James Wormley Jones was named the first African American special agent with the FBI the following year, working under J. Edgar Hoover. One of his assignments was to monitor the actions of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and Marcus Garvey. Federal investigations into the finances of the Black Star Line, along with a blistering analysis of the shipping line by W.E.B. Du Bois in the NAACP's Crisis magazine, gave fuel to Garvey's black critics. A. Philip Randolph personally critiqued the economic feasibility of the Black Star Line in The Messenger and accused Garvey of squandering the hard-earned money of his hard-working poor supporters. This led to the government charging Garvey with mail fraud in connection with the Black Star Line. Garvey would eventually be convicted of mail fraud charges in 1923. He was jailed in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in February 1925, where he would serve almost 3 years of a 5-year sentence. And in 1927, Garvey would be deported from the United States, never to return. While the Garvey Must Go campaign was successful in its immediate goals, it also deepened divisions within the African American community. The Marcus Garvey Must Go campaign was a significant moment in the history of the civil rights movement in the United States, particularly within the African American community. This campaign was a concerted effort by certain factions within the African American leadership and some federal entities to discredit and undermine Marcus Garvey, a prominent black nationalist and leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The Marcus Garvey Must Go campaign succeeded in diminishing Garvey's influence within the United States, particularly after his deportation. However, his ideas continue to inspire future generations of black leaders and movements. Until next time, if you like little-known history facts as I do, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Press the bell to be notified of future uploads. Thank you for watching.